Okay, thank you for taking the time with me to meet with me today. I appreciate
Okay.
that. So, let me go ahead and start my presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you. Are you
Is
able
that a real room, Channing, or is that your
No,
background?
this is a background.
Oh, it took me this long to figure that out.
This is a background.
That's a pretty good background.
I love it because, it's like, oh, here for the
It
kids.
looks like a real
It
room.
doesn't look like a real classroom, doesn't it?
Yep.
At any rate, I digress.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go ahead and get started with our proposal today. My proposal today is regarding leadership uh, project here at our school at Washington
Mm-hmm.
U. Ying. Um, Obviously, we are Washington U. Ying, a charter school. We are a Chinese immersion school. So we are definitely focused on culture and diversity here at our school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wanted to talk a little bit about our mission and vision. Our mission and vision are the things that really drive our decision. And I think it's important whenever we're proposing something to think about our mission and vision. So, our mission says inspiring and preparing young people to create a better world by challenging them to reach their full potential in a nurturing Chinese/English educational environment. And what really sticks out for me that connects with this project is having a nurturing experience, helping students achieve their full potential. And so this project
Mm-hmm.
certainly supports that. When we look at the vision of our school, that reads creating a strong community of learners who are confident in their ability to read, write, and think in Chinese and English languages and have intercultural understanding and respect. So when I think about our project, it supports the intercultural understanding and respect aspect of our school.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about why I'm proposing this. First, can you see this, by the way? These are,
Yeah.
okay, wonderful. Um, I wanted to share with you demographic disparities between our school and Washington U. Ying. So
Mm-hmm.
as you can see, Washington U. Ying is in the green there. It's in the lime green. It is consistent in terms of a trend from Black students, white students, Hispanic students, and Asian students. Now, let me go back a little bit. This is a graph that shows population by race in
Mm-hmm.
our school. So as you can see, our trend line is very similar to that of Washington, D.C.'s public school. The
Mm-hmm.
disparity really comes in when you look at the gap. I mean, in DC public schools, you'll see a tremendous gap between white students and Black students. And although our gap at Washington U Ying is not as prevalent as the gap in Washington, D.C., I think it's important if our students are going to participate in the greater Washington, D.C. community that they understand what's happening from a cultural standpoint with their contemporaries.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with other students in the fourth grade from a demographic standpoint that I need to be aware of. And so again, we just represent the rest of the city. I just want to make sure that our students don't exist in a bubble
Mm-hmm.
where, you know, that is not representative of what the rest of the city represents.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's move forward to the objective of the project. My objective is really the overarching objective um, is to make that gap between students of color and students of non-color smaller. Ever since Brown v. Board of Education, really the gap has remained, which is astonishing to me since Brown v. Board of Education was so long ago.
Mhm.
The gap still continues. I want our teachers to really understand that gap and adopt strategies that are going to help our students of color. Because students of color certainly have unique challenges, and I want our students, our teachers really, to be more engaged with students of color and to understand the challenges that come with being a student of color.
Mhm.
I also want for this project to have greater administrative support. There may be some changes that we need to make in the classroom, certainly as it relates to teaching strategies. And I just want to make sure we have the full support of our administration. And obviously, we want to dispel stereotypes and foster mutual respect among cultures. Now, I know that we focus on Chinese English culture, but it's important to also integrate other cultures that are also part of the greater Washington, D.C. area. So here's the impact to stakeholders on our project. Obviously, as I mentioned, it is in support of our mission of diversity and inclusion. It's going to foster school support for our students of color, not only within the school, but also within the greater DC area. It's going to improve our Black students' sense of inclusion in the school. It's going to help like-minded teachers actually connect with like-minded teachers. I know we talk a lot about professional network. So this is a way for us to connect um, teachers together who have this knowledge and consciousness and who want to develop it and overall make the world a better place. I really do mean that. I, I really do mean that when I say that. I really believe it starts with one child at a time.
Mhm.
So if we can reach one child, then we're certainly going to make the world a better place. So here's what I want to do in the project, okay? So what we're going to do is we're all going to read for white folks only who teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too, reality pedagogy and urban education, race education, and democracy. That book was written by Christopher um, Eb, Eb, Ebden, mm, Ebden, Emden. Help me with that. Let's just say
That's okay.
that our writer is Dr. Christopher, and he wrote this book around how to teach to the urban student. And there are 9 philosophies, 9 strategies within the book that we're going to talk about. And we're going to do this as a book club. And each teacher is going to be responsible for reading the book in its entirety before we come to our class. But then I'm going to divide the groups into teacher groups, and each group is going to present one of the 9 teaching strategies.
Mhm. Mhm.
So essentially, we'll be learning. I'll be leading a team of teachers who learn about these strategies. Now, each group is going to consist of a champion. So that person is going to be the leader of the group. They're going to take the leadership role. Members, of course, of the team. But here's what I love, our devil's advocate. So I want in each team at least one person who's going to present a challenge to the strategy, and the group is going to be responsible for solving that strategy. I think it's really important to get everyone's buy-in when we're making a change like this, but it's not a drastic change, it's just part of what we're already doing. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times when we want to implement a change, some folks might say, oh gosh, yet another thing I have to do in my busy day. We just want to talk about how we can integrate these strategies into what we're already doing. And I love this because whenever we're introducing a new idea, there's always someone in the room in the back of their head saying this is not going to work. So
Mhm.
we're going to address those right away, right away. So in terms of implementation, of course, we have our summer. professional development time. So this will be right before the uh, school year 2021-2022, and it's going to be a 2-week process. So you'll see days 1 and 3. We're going to talk about the major themes of the book and teaching pedagogies. And then days 4 to 10, that's where our teachers are going to collaborate in their groups, going to design their project and their presentation. And then days 11 through 14, that's when they're going to actually present their um, presentation to the rest of the teachers. So
Okay.
I think this would really benefit our school in terms of um, our inclusion and sense of um, inclusion within our school. So we already talked about this, that the objective is really going to be for the teachers to design and present their this teaching strategy that they've been assigned. I want them to understand the teaching strategies. I want the teacher groups to create a presentation. Hopefully it's dynamic. I want there to be some positive group energy within the team. So, what do you think, Principal Glenda? Do you think we should move forward with this project? What
Well,
question?
I have a couple of questions, so I gotta ask the questions as Glenda instructed Glenda because
Okay, Instructor Glenda.
so this is a good presentation, Channing. I it, now okay, so the achievement gap.
Hmm.
So I have to ask this question as a regular role because I don't know the achievement the achievement gap in Washington U Ying.
Hmm.
Does it is it similar to the overall achievement gap that Black students or African American students face throughout the Washington D.C. area?
Well, it's
So,
interesting because Washington, D.C. has a very rigorous program.
mhm,
And so if we look at numbers, sheer numbers, the gap is not as prevalent as in the DC public schools. So the gap is
mhm,
there, but it's certainly not as prevalent. And I
mhm,
do think because of the smaller class sizes, the
mhm,
more rigorous the program. I mean,
mhm.
it's a marvelous job that is being done at this school. That the achievement gap is not as prevalent as DC public schools, but
Okay.
it's there. Yeah, it's there.
So my other question is, since it's a Chinese immersion school, the Chinese language,
Hmm.
in terms of textbooks or any other course materials, how is how does Washington U Ying represent other cultures? Is it all just Chinese and I represent other cultures in terms of images in instructional resources? Is
Hmm.
it Chinese or Asian
Hmm.
and white uh,
Yes.
Americans,
Yeah.
or is there a variety, that would include Asian, Hispanic, you know?
There's a definite emphasis on the Chinese English cultural presentations or cultural disparities, and we teach that a lot. On
Mm-hmm.
the English days, though, so what we have is every other day is English and Chinese. So
Mm-hmm.
the instruction is fully English on Mondays and Wednesdays, and it's
Mm-hmm.
fully Chinese on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
So on those
Interesting.
days,
Mm-hmm.
so on those days, it's very easy to incorporate um, concepts, materials, um, individuals of color who have been successful in their particular
Mm-hmm.
field, so we can visually see that connection between success and people that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there are opportunities to do that, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly more limited than the Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And um, what is the demographics or the racial demographics of the teachers in the school?
Great question. The disparity is higher actually. So
Mm-hmm.
we have fewer teachers of color at Washington U Ying
Mm-hmm.
than we do in DC public schools.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there's still a gap in DC public schools between teachers of color and students
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of color. So we need more teachers of color so that we can continue to bolster that.
I think that you know, it's definitely, it's definitely a good project because I'm choosing my words carefully. Because since DC has such a large percentage of Black students and
Mm-hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and since the school is inside of DC,
Right.
then there should be more um, effort or emphasis on diversity and also being aware of the type of challenges
Mm-hmm.
that students of color have uh, in the overall system. And I
Right.
feel like a Chinese immersion school will be well versed on Chinese culture
Exactly.
and well versed on, if we want to call it European culture, or we can call it that,
Mm-hmm.
but may not see that there's a need
Mm-hmm.
to be aware of the cultures that's in the school.
Right.
It's almost like
Yeah.
trading one major culture for another major culture,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But still not looking at the other ethnic groups that have to participate,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think that it's definitely a good. I like the way you structured it. I like that it would be that they have assignments, okay, um, that they have to read the book,
Right.
okay. But I also think, now I haven't read the book, but I know the work of Dr. Christopher Emden. So
Emden. Thank you,
yes,
Christopher
Emden.
Emden.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't read the book, so I like that he has strategies.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you were actually implementing this project,
Mm-hmm.
that you would need to be prepared with some background information,
About him.
background history, not necessarily about him, about why there is a need.
Oh,
So this is so I'm giving this to you as Glenda, the instructor, and
gotcha.
that if you were really the sense that I have about the charter school, that
Mm-hmm.
if this was actually going to be implemented, then you may want to also be prepared that the um, current teachers and administration in your school
Mm-hmm.
would not may not have the information or the history
Mm-hmm.
behind why this is even a need in the first place.
Mm.
One of the things that has come up in the last, I don't even know, it's all a blur, really. I don't know if it's 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, somewhere within the 4 years, but definitely this year
Mm-hmm.
is racism and how it is prevalent in different parts of American society.
Sure. Systemic racism.
Systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many people that this is just news to them now.
Right.
because it's in their face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this didn't just happen this year.
Right.
So I guess I'm saying, just in terms of, I don't know if you're going to choose to do this
Mm.
with the school or on your own as a professional development option that you do,
Mm-hmm.
um, or if you're going to another school. But I would say that it's a good presentation, but you may want to include, as part of the
Mm-hmm.
professional development, a little history
Yes.
of why this is necessary in the first place.
It didn't even,
Because you may have a lot of the teachers.
mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about, I watched your mentor briefings. Even your mentor may not have any reason to believe that this might be something that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens, mm, if you come from one dominant culture into another dominant culture, you may just look at those two,
Right.
because their world, um, their countries have prominence in the world. You understand what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
China has a prominence in the world. America has a prominence in the world. But China also, if we're just dealing with China, they are very ethnocentric. So it's China and Chinese culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? But but for this school, this Chinese immersion, so now the Chinese teachers completely immerse themselves in English so that they are able to compete and teach in, in another dominant culture.
Sure.
And in the midst of that,
Uh-huh.
the same issue, the same reason why you want to propose this as a project comes up, because the thinking is not going, the thinking could be, well, if they just follow the lessons and the coursework,
Mm.
it'll be okay. So this is Glenda, the
Yeah. The
instructor,
instructor.
speaking.
In the
But the
third,
way it is, right?
yeah.
So the way it is,
Mhm.
it's a good project. If you intend to implement this, you would have to consider adding that piece. I would recommend it, because if you're going to talk about how not to be biased, you have to understand what bias is in the first place, as an example. And some people may not understand what their biases are. They don't understand the type of different biases. You have to have that type of discussion. So I like the
Something,
timeline.
yes.
It you know I I could visualize. I'm like, wow, yeah, this is pretty immersive. They have to read the book, and they have assignments, and they have to come up with teaching strategies.
Mhm.
um, and some of those strategies are not necessarily only exclusive for the African American community, is also for the Hispanic community, which for any Hispanic students that you may have in the
Sure.
school, or
Mhm.
any students of any other ethnic group other than Asian
Mhm.
or white, those strategies still fit, because those are the groups, the ethnic groups that are not represented in the larger society.
Mhm.
So let me see.
It never really occurred to me that the teachers wouldn't have a baseline understanding
Yeah.
of what's going on. So
You
Yeah.
when we're talking about things like this, one should make sure
Yeah.
that there is an understanding.
Sure.
I understand,
Mm-hmm.
but it's quite obvious why I do.
Sure.
So if you were presenting this project to a school in the DC, well, it wouldn't even be necessary. Well, it kind of would be.
I
They
know.
might like it, but a school in the DC area that there was a large the majority of the teachers were African American or black, whichever. Um, you might not, you wouldn't have to make that same assumption
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have to explain to the same group why there's an issue,
Right.
right? And
Right.
the way that they would embrace this work, okay, would be from a position of, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's see
Right.
what we can do,
Sure.
as opposed to when you're presenting to other groups to, who may not even see the need. This this these children just need to read more, or they just need to do more math, or whatever the case may be. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
because we are in a season
Mm.
where this discussion of diversity and inclusiveness and systemic racism, so you're onto something, Shannon, because these are the types of discussions that some schools all over the country, all over Twitter. Remember the Twitter event? There's all these different Twitter types of things as well, because now you've got educators that are like, oh my goodness. Some who knew all along, but some who are just becoming aware this is an issue.
Mm.
So I like the presentation.